Thank you. It's a great honor to work with Ken Vandermark anytime we get a chance. And we've cooked up something different. I'm on a book tour right now, and we're going to do something different from what I've done anywhere else. And I wanted to let you know that the format this evening will be one continuous interweaving of readings and playing. Just so you know. Hear me okay? A little boomy? No, sounds fine. Good. Three boys are hanging out in the upstairs bedroom of a suburban house. The tallest, whose teeth are braced in silver, is also the quietest, but it's his room, so he's the one who puts on some music. The next tallest is well-built, his body tanned and toned from the swim club. The third is compact. His hair is golden and parted in the middle, and it cascades over his ears to his t-shirt collar. The needle drops onto Ted Nugent's new record, a current favorite of this triumvirate. The first sound comes from the title track, built of power chords and bad attitude, lifting the tall one to stand erect and leave his perch on the unmade bed. Swiveling his head, he looks one way, looks the other, then starts to walk. His shoulders slump, his head dips, his feet drag. He's doing a pimp strut. He's not sure what a pimp is. He is 13. The song bursts into action and the trio is on top of it, the short one leaping atop the mattress, bouncing in rhythm to the thunderous sound pummeling the little speakers. At the guitar solo, all three lock into air guitar stance, their faces grimace, right hands dropped low, feigning rapid fire picking, left hands maniacally kinetic, matching each note of the solo. Braces. Hey, numbnuts, what are you doing? The three slacken to a halt like they've run out of battery while the music blares on. Biceps. Who do you mean? Braces. To hairdo. You're doing it wrong. Hairdo. What are you talking about? I was totally into it. Braces. But you were going the wrong way. When the guitar notes are getting higher, your hand has to move toward you, not away. The way you were going, the notes would be getting lower. Nobody goes lower in a guitar solo. Biceps, he's right. You don't go down if the guitar solo is going up. Anybody knows that. Braces, let's go easy on him. Remember his condition. Biceps, what condition? Braces, terminal spaz. Hairdo, dickwads. The tall one lifts the tone arm and moves it back to another track. Are you ready for wang dang, sweet poon tang? Hit me, says the medium. Hit me hard. Pantomime begins again as the Nuge starts soloing. Small one, careful not to go the wrong direction, dives into the center, down on his knees for all to see. They don't know what poontang is either. Were I doomed to live in isolation with just one record? And I don't mean lolling around on a desert island so much as being jettisoned into outer space, an actual rocket man living out his life up there alone. I think that solitary record would be by Parliament. For 4 decades straight, I've been listening to Mothership Connection, and through all those repetitions, it has never grown dim. Even today, I continue to hear new sounds in its intricate arrangements, pluck associations out of its web of metaphors and allusions, and find previously dormant pockets of kineticism in its antechambers. Mothership is the everlasting gobstopper of 70s music. Here we go round the corner into the 4th quarter of the 20th century. Keep funk alive in 75, our motto told us. Shit, Lord Almighty, God, funk as we knew it was nowhere near dead. It was just learning to walk, a toddler getting into things with assistance from Papa George Clinton. Guitarist James Blood Ulmer rightly proclaimed, jazz is the teacher, funk is the preacher. Hallelujah, amen. Once upon a time, called Now, hollers Clinton on P-Funk wants to get funked up, assuming his guise as Lollipop Man, alias the long-haired sucker. For emphasis, a short while later, he adds once upon a time called Right Now. To which now does he refer? When is right now in the parlance of Parliament? What constitutes the present tense for a parliamentarian? It might be the now of the recording, which would place it between March and October 1975. It could be the now of the initial listening, which for many people would be early in 1976, when the band cemented the record's legacy with a Gaga lunatic tour. Now could be more general, placing the middle of the 70s into the framework of a fairy tale through its Once Upon a Time, linguistically converting the landing of their urban spaceship into a contemporary ghetto folktale, as if it was both specifically of its time and outside of history. But with that emphatic right affixed to now, Lollipop Man seems to say that if Mothership Connection is going to be a fairy tale, it's got to be a brand spanking new one, freshly conceived, a fairy tale for today. In other words, the myth starts here. Tap the space brakes. One more possibility, the floating now, by which I mean the now that meanders from now to, wait a sec, feel it, now. The immediate present, the ever-shifting end product of immanence that is the subject of all music, transversal of which is the concept opened up by electromagnetic technology. The recording angels of tape and album, alluded to by name in Lolly's self-same monologue, allow one now to be invoked in another, one present tense to take place at a different time altogether. Those funky Afrocentric spacemen from 1975, they're hustling along through time by means of their record album shuttle, stopping off every now and then, no, every now and now, to get played, get laid, get it on, move along. There he is, the same guy who once sang the praises of simple songs and everyday people, the seraphic center of a new flower-powered universe, offering his third meditation on thankfulness in as many records, each of which had a different tone, warning everyone in his circle, remember, all yours could have been all mine. It's a jealous, hubristic lyric, redolent of drug fiend paranoia, on a record that flashes between being a suicide note and a comeback, a celebration of vanquishing dependencies and an admission of submitting to them, a slip of paper that reads thank you and another that reads gone fishing. Mixed messages couched in some of the most inventive pop music ever put to tape. Fresh is more sly than Family Stone. It continues a gradual slide towards solipsism that started with its predecessor, There's a Riot Going On, an ominous and complex outing that was a cipher of the zeitgeist, with molten funk and nervous pop bearing witness to a poetic vision that drew negative energy in equal proportion to all the upbeat positivity of the early Family Stone music. They'd once represented the ideal end-of-era outcome, a multicultural, mixed-gender troupe drawing together different musical styles without regard for their supposed audience, casting demography aside, as a result calling forth a whole new crowd, one that appreciated the anti-segregationist egalitarian medley of psychedelic, soul, funk, doo-wop, rock, electronic music, and jazz. Parliament Funkadelic would certainly not have been the enterprise they became without Stone's nudge, nor would the Temptations have expanded their erstwhile conservative horizons. Even Miles Davis turned an electrified ear towards Sly's musical omnibus. But now Sly and what was left of the family were something else, another kind of sign of the times. And as times were changing, so was Sly's outlook. He had answered Marvin Gaye's question, what's going on with There's a Riot Going On, his version of the Stooges' No Fun, which was in fact pretty fucking fun. Anyway, riot has a dual meaning, no doubt Sly's point. Bay Area counterculture had turned on itself. Altamont provided terrifying evidence of the fact, most vividly in the person of one Meredith Hunter, the mystery man who was stabbed to death by the Hells Angels. With his black shirt, brown skin, and mint green suit, he stood out against the hippie biker crowd, a fly dude in the ointment, exactly the kind of fan that the Rolling Stones wanted, the prancing huggy bear that Mick Jagger emulated lying limp at the foot of the stage, along with the optimism and good faith that had brought everyone together. Who was Meredith Hunter but a Sly stand-in, the enigma, the sporty rags, the killer instinct, even the pistol he'd waved that brought his brutal demise? They're all Sly. Looking at the devil, Sly sang on Riot as all hope slipped away, oozing into the parched earth like the blood out of a wound. Grinning at his gun, fingers start shaking. I begin to run. And a little later, thank you for the party. I could never stay. Show's over, folks. A cop on the scene, or maybe just an angel. Move along, people. Nothing to see here. Some artists have a fraught relationship to their time. Sun Ra's position was more extreme. He was an outright enemy of time. Ra resisted the human imperative to expire. Choose life, not death, he once titled an essay. And he memorably titled a piece, It's After the End of the World, Don't You Know That Yet? At the beginning of the semi-autobiographical film Space is the Place, he eagerly anticipated a moment when people would, quote, consider time officially ended. He was, quite literally, looking forward to the end of time. A musician like this, as you can imagine, might have a complicated feeling about his own place in history. The last time I spoke with Ra, I asked him for his take on the enduring legacy of the great American songbook. It was 1993. Ra had returned to Birmingham, Alabama, where he'd been born nearly 80 years prior. He would die there from complications associated with pneumonia a few weeks later. The pianist, composer, and bandleader's first published composition, Alone with Just a Memory of You, written in 1936, together with one Henry McKellen's, conveyed a tender, awkward, Tin Pan Alley tone that betrayed his love of sentimental songcraft. This passion is driven home repeatedly in a survey of Ra's magnificently gigantic discography. He employed anachronistic singers like Clyde Williams and Hattie Randolph. He played familiar compositions with double entendre titles meaningful to him, such as East of the Sun, Keep Your Sunny Side Up, I Dream Too Much, Out of Nowhere, This Is Always, Second Star to the Right, and Over the Rainbow. Never mind that Ra is known to many as one of the most adventurous and innovative figures in the history of the 20th century, that he brought synthesizers to jazz, that his costumes and light shows paved the way for psychedelic rock, that he wrote apocalyptic and deeply philosophical poetry, that he identified as extraterrestrial, that outer space and the unknown featured as prominently as ancient Egypt in his unique proto-Afrofuturist Weltanschauung, which often manifested as a circus-like performance troupe called the orchestra. Ra couldn't resist a good song. His reply to my question was typically elliptical, asking me to consider his interest in comic books. The reason he read comics, especially when he was a young musician, he said, was that the artists that made them worked within a set format and had crazy deadlines, which meant they had to be creative under pressure. They didn't have the luxury of time. The great ones rose out of a homogenizing environment, and the individual spark ignited by their work happened in such a strict context that its genius was undeniable. Like Jerome Kern, the Gershwins, and Cole Porter, comic book artists had expressed their ingenuity in an especially claustrophobic and constraining genre, the popular Broadway show tune. It's after midnight at the Zigzag Tavern, so named for its staggered stage shows and the way its leering clientele darts between them. The year is 1951. The town is Calumet City, Illinois. Sun Ra is at the piano, right hand playing a bluesy ostinato, left hand leaving the keyboard for a moment to flip the pages of Schopenhauer's On the Freedom of the Will, propped up on the piano lid. There's a chorus of whoops and hollers from the other side of the white sheet, behind which he and his bandmates are hidden. Ra recognizes the cue and begins a volume swell. One by one, articles of women's clothing are tossed into the air, appearing for a flash above the white curtain. Ra nods at drummer Tommy Bugs Hunter, who winds up and begins to deliver a bump and grind beat. The tenor saxophonist Red Holloway ladling on some extra groove juice. They've been there since 6 o'clock and will be there until the other 6 o'clock. His accomplices have been relieved at intervals by other musicians, but not Ra. He will play behind the strippers, various MCs, and occasional comedian throughout the night. The piece is finished, panties finally flung high, accompanied by wolfish sounds, and now the pianist is up adjusting his tape recorder, changing the reel, and waiting for the next girl to hit the stage. He's closed Schopenhauer and opened the latest edition of John Carter of Mars, a comic book modeled on Buck Rogers. For the rest of the night, when he's not eating a sandwich from the bar or running back and forth to the toilet, Ra will read and record and perform, an automatic multitasker. Somewhere in the Swiss countryside in September 1976, in a chalet belonging to the cellist Michael Overhaeg, without professional equipment, direct to cassette tape, Joe McPhee recorded one of the most landmark solo saxophone recitals in the history of creative music. Swinging a microphone over the rafter in front of a few friends with whom he'd just eaten dinner and had a few drinks, including both his record producers, Craig Johnson and Werner X. Eulinger, McPhee wended his way across 4 pieces, 3 of them simple, bluesy melodies he'd been working on for an upcoming solo project, patiently unfurling their contents, opening them up and improvising away from and then back to the tunes, the final piece long and spacious and without a theme. In this period, improvising musicians often felt the urge to expand their instrumentarium, playing all the related instruments of a family, following the lead of people like Eric Dolphy, Ken McIntyre, and Yusef Lateef, or branching out and embracing anything they could coax into sound making, like the Art Ensemble of Chicago did with their tables of so-called little instruments, whiz-bangs, scrapers, gongs, slide whistles, electric guitars, and police sirens. On tenor, McPhee, the instrumentalist, restricted his instrumentation. For an afternoon, the Poughkeepsie-based Independent left the pocket trumpet in its case, likewise soprano and alto saxophones, and the valve trombone he'd inherited from Clifford Thornton. Anthony Braxton had followed the same procedure on a landmark double LP called For Alto in 1969, which was something of a gauntlet for reed players in the 70s. McPhee picked it up almost without realizing he was doing it, on a record made by accident, a private performance somewhere between practicing, rehearsal, and a concert. On one side of the LP, McPhee weaves his way through Knox, a lullaby in 12-bar blues form, the economical Sweet Dragon, which sprouts cascades of slurring sound like a spider plant, and the elegiac Goodbye Tom B., a theme with its own little internal call and response, McPhee feeling around for the bottom of the tenor's deep pool, injecting his voice into the already highly vocal saxophone, like Dewey Redman before him, but chewier, more ductile and melancholic. The title track is a 23-minute exercise in turning oxygen into emotion, an open letter to Albert Ayler, and an almost direct communication with the universe from the depths of McPhee's 37-year-old heart. A common conception of the function of music is that it's meant to communicate with others, that it comes from an urge to express so that fellow humans can feel what the musician feels. This impulse is familiar, and no doubt in the main it is true. People make music for each other. We recognize the magnetic way that music calls forth a community. But there's another way to understand musical desire. Imagine that it comes from a very private place, not to be in conversation with others, but as a means of meditating on one's own situation. To frame it as an act of intimacy is perhaps not enough. It can be hermetic, a way to commune with the walls, to depth sound the ceiling, to feel oneself exhaling and inhaling, to measure existence in terms of what sound it makes, and not to do it for anybody else, but just to do it, alone, without concern for aesthetic quality, communicative value, or popular success. It is no wonder that McPhee was close friends with experimental composer and musician Pauline Oliveros, whose deep listening band made a habit of this kind of music. The crudeness of the recording does not dim tenor's sheer questing authority. In fact, it intensifies the record's solitary quality, the feeling of not playing toward anyone. McPhee's sound emanates into the atmosphere more like a radio wave or the silent spirit of trees or the gentle ambience of a brook, not designed to show someone something, but also not without a magnificent gravitational force. Reflected in the tarnished gold of his Selmer bell, you can hear the dark interior of the day. When Lester Bowie died in 1999, Downbeat magazine asked me to collect comments from his friends and colleagues for a memorial. The Art Ensemble of Chicago's trumpeter was just 58 years old, a master of shouts and slurs, normally decked out in a white lab coat, stylish pointy beard, and horn-rimmed glasses. Bowie had been a force in creative music since moving to Chicago from St. Louis in 1965 with his wife, a promising soul singer named Fontella Bass. That year, he served as her musical director as she took to the studio of Chess Records. The band Bowie assembled included future Earth, Wind & Fire leader Maurice White on drums and Louis Satterfield on bass, both members of Phil Coran's Artistic Heritage Ensemble, with pre-Rotary connection Minnie Riperton on backing vocals. The session resulted in Rescue Me, a million-selling soul classic. Bass was one of the first people I interviewed for the story. Though they eventually divorced, she and Bowie had raised their 4 children together and remained friends. At the end of our conversation, I was compelled to thank her for singing Theme de Yo-Yo, which she had recorded as a guest with Bowie and the Art Ensemble during their Parisian sojourn in 1970. "Oh, that's so sweet of you. You remember that," she said. The song had not yet had its renaissance, which happened a few years later, but it had been a stone-cold hit in my head since I'd acquired the LP L'Estance of Sophie in high school. "That was a good one," she added, followed by a reflective silence. Then something magical happened. Fontella dropped her voice, hummed a few bars of Malachi's Favor's bass line, and sang the song, all of it, quietly, like a purr, in a voice that had lowered an octave in the intervening 3 decades. "Your head is like a yo-yo, your neck is like a string, your body's like camembert oozing from its skin, your fanny's like 2 sperm whales floating down the Seine, your voice is like a long fuck that's music to your brain. Your eyes are 2 blind eagles that kill what they can't see. Your hands are like 2 shovels digging in me. And your love is like an oil well, dig, dig, dig it on the Champs-Élysées." My wife, Terry, who had been walking past my office, caught sight of my expression and stepped in, her face asking, "What's up?" I put my hand over the transmitter. "She's singing Theme de Yo-Yo," I explained, holding up the receiver for both of us to hear. When Bass finished, I composed myself and said, "That was incredible. I have to admit, I'm totally blushing." She laughed, and we said goodbye. When we heard of Bass's passing the day after Christmas 2012, Terry and I toasted her and relived that call for a few friends. What do you think? Or? Let's do one more. Until all creative thought is extinguished, curiosity will be the yeast in our bread and the seeds in our mulch, the ore in our pond and the little motor on our model plane. Raw curiosity helps things grow and makes things go. Being curious expanded my musical horizons and drove me to listen to things unfamiliar, not just out of concern for the music itself, but as an act of putting myself in someone else's shoes. My attention could be focused on another person and their enthusiasm. How, I sometimes thought to myself in genuine wonder, could anybody like that? This question led me to observe those likers of alien things as they listened, to attempt listening as they did, and as often as not to discover something enlightening in the process. I remember once seeing an older friend dancing like a possessed person to a group opening for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers and thinking, look at him love the shit out of that very ordinary music. There must be something in it I'm missing. And because the Jay Giles Band hadn't yet soiled themselves with Love Stinks, I discovered that there was indeed much there to love. How to adopt alien ears. It's not just a matter of being undiscerning, it's a matter of learning to discern differently. First, adopt what Zen Buddhists call beginner's mind. Suspend judgments, especially ones based in aesthetics. Accept that you will make the mistakes of a novice because you know no better. Try to understand how the system of discernment native to this unfamiliar music relates to other systems of discernment you understand better. Hold fast to a relativistic attitude, all the while establishing likes and dislikes within the newfound music. Become a neophyte connoisseur. Discern differently. Curiosity leads us out of the tribe. Gingerly, under cover of night, we sneak into someone else's closet, try on their clothes, steal the ones we like, shock everybody back home by appearing one day in a green forage cap and dark blue monkey jacket, like our head is bound for the woods and our body for the sea. We are curious. We embrace eclecticism. Thank you. Q&A.
Hey everybody, stick around. We're going to do a little Q&A action here, but stick around because we have a Polish buffet coming and we can all have dinner together, and I think it will be lovely. John will also be signing books, and we have some merchandise from Ken as well back there. So we're going to take a few questions. Who has one that would like to get us started? Oh, shy crowd. No? Ah, great.
Have you ever listened to Bill Burton on WXYC? Because you kind of, this show kind of reminds me a lot of Bill Burton on WXYC, and that's important.
I missed the beginning.
Have you ever listened to Bill Burton on WXYC?
Oh, no. I have. You should. Good.
Sorry. Oh, you don't?
Ken and I met in 1986 in Somerville, Massachusetts, and it was a funny situation. I lived in Somerville, and Ken lived in Boston. Yeah? And I was walking down the street near my house, and I heard some interesting sounding music coming out of a club called the Willow Jazz Club that I didn't even know was a jazz club. It was very non-distinct, and I'd never been in there before, but I was just walking by and I heard some creative music, some weird music coming out of there, and I went in 1986 and met Ken because he was playing with a group of his called the Lombard Street Trio. And a day later, he and and the guitar player from the band came over to my house, and we sat and listened to music together and hit it off. And then we didn't see each other again for a long time, I think.
Yeah, and John moved to Chicago right after that, right?
Yeah.
And then I didn't get to Chicago until 1989, and we started bumping into each other again as the music started happening there.
And so Ken had kind of changed his look a little bit by then. He had sort of flattened the top of his head, and I barely recognized him. And I turned to my wife and I said, I think that's Ken Vandermark over there, because I didn't know he'd moved to town. And he was sitting in, just beginning to join a band, the Hal Russell's band called the Energy Ensemble. I saw you guys play down there. And then we worked together extensively. So we've worked together. We booked a regular series at the Empty Bottle Club in Chicago together for about 10 years and did 9 festivals at the Empty Bottle, and have worked together in many different contexts. And yeah, it was great. It was a pleasure getting to work with him anytime. Yeah.
So I have a question. I'm of a certain era. I remember all these people. Is this historical for you, or did you actually live it?
Oh, no, I lived it, yeah. I mean, the stories in there, the story about the 3 boys and Ted Nugent is drawn from precisely as a 55-year-old memory can draw it, from an experience that I had. There are a lot of stories in the book. I didn't read a lot of the stories tonight. I've been on a book tour and been reading in a bunch of different places, and it was really fun to get to change it up a little bit and kind of also read a little bit more of the jazz and improvised music side of it than I had been. You know, there are stories about going to see Pink Floyd on their Animals tour, about Yes. And for me, having written for a long time about more obscure music, music that not as many people know as Yes and Pink Floyd, one of the challenges that I set for myself in writing this book was to try to find my own way to write about that music, because that music's meaningful to me, some of it in a sentimental way and some of it in an ongoing musical way. And so I set out to do that, and I found that one of the ways that was helpful to me was to deal with it in a very personal way and go back into it and deal with it biographically, and to try to uncover what it was about beginning to make my way through the world by means of music that might be of interest to people now. So there's a lot more about me in this book than I ever thought there would be, but yeah, from the era.
Oh, okay, we're in an art museum. You're a writer, he's a musician. Like in Chicago, are cross-fertilizations among the various groups common? And if so, how does it happen and what are the results of it?
Cross-fertilization is a tough word. I mean, it's good. I mean, I think within music, let's say, I think Chicago's a place where there's a particular kind of openness between people in different camps. Ken might disagree with me or have a different perspective, but I think that it's pretty true. I mean, I've seen Ken play in garage rock bands. I've seen him play, you know, in a lot of different contexts before he was as solidly leading his own groups and doing his own thing and really kind of forging his own totally new kind of music, genreless kind of music or new genre music. So within music, I think there is a lot of cross-fertilization. Across the arts, I don't think Chicago is different in that way, except that there are certain individuals. I'm one of them who's really passionately devoted to a bunch of different media. And I've tried to mix those things in a meaningful way, not just haphazardly. So I have an art gallery. We present periodic concerts there, so you can see Ken's played there a couple times. Lots of different music there over the course of the last 15 years. But it's not a regular series. It's something we do irregularly in a way to kind of try to bring the art audience in to see the music, and sometimes the music audience comes in and they say, hey, what's this stuff on the walls or on the floor? And so that's an active attempt to cross-pollinate. But I think that happens a lot of different places. I don't think Chicago is any different than a lot of places as far as that goes. I mean, you know, the Bay Area was really good for that at a certain point, you know. In the Beat era, there was a lot of that going on between poetry and jazz, for instance. Yeah. So maybe that's a dodge, but.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
John Corbett and Ken Vandermark.
Ken, I think if each of you buys 5 copies of each of Ken's records that he brought tonight, he'll only be taking a few home. So I would get them as Christmas presents, and you'll all need to, each of you will need to buy 10 copies of my book, and then we'll be in good shape. No, I'm happy to sign them, and he doesn't know this, but he's signing his records too.